we have the cast and creative team of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Make some noise. Heather Langenkamp, Amanda Wyss, Mimi Craven, and Mick Strawn. Make some noise. So I'm going to kick things off for a little bit, guys, and then about halfway through, we'll start calling out audience questions. And again, this is for everybody. How was, the project or the franchise first presented to you, and what were your first impressions when you first became involved in the Nightmare on Elm Street universe?
You want to start, Mandy?
I first heard, I got an audition from my agent and was sent the script. I read it. It read like a really great horror novel. I went in, auditioned for the role of Nancy, which I did not get, obviously. And then met Heather at the callback, and we read together. And that was that. I think he told us that day, or close to that.
Yeah, it was close to that day or the next day, yeah. Actually, we found out there.
Yeah.
He told us.
Yeah.
When we were in the audition.
Yeah.
I just read the sides. I didn't even read the script when I got it. I read it for Nancy, and I always tell the story that they didn't have furniture in the casting office, so we all had to sit on the floor and wait for our name to be called, and then we, went in. There were not 200 people there. There was me and like one other sad Hollywood actress sitting on the floor, and I remember I had been worried about my car being stolen because it was on one of the worst streets in Hollywood, and I just, all I could think about is my little crappy car is going to get stolen, and I don't have anything to show for this audition.
Okay, and I was sleeping with the director.
Woo! Ow! No, but now, Mimi, I want to
Nick,
ask
I'm guessing same story
no,
for you, different story?
No, same thing, exactly the same thing.
Were you
No.
sleeping with it?
Good.
No, I'm just kidding.
The real
I
Nightmare
wanted to
from
ask
Elm
Mimi one thing.
A gentleman doesn't kiss and tell.
Okay,
I just say.
but Mimi, when did Wes mention Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time?
Okay, I was a flight attendant. Wes was on his way to South Carolina to do Swamp Thing, and he came up to me and said, literally, "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Please come and be in my movie." And I didn't know then that he was the shyest person, and it had taken everything he could do to ask me, and I literally went, turned around, and I got a telegram from the from the producer saying, "Please come. My director can't eat. He can't sleep." I did it, and after I did the movie and we fell in love, I moved to LA. He was just starting to write Nightmare on Elm Street. And so he would go out into the office, and it was the old days when PCs were like that big, and he would sit like this in a pith helmet and a bathrobe.
Wow.
And he would write all day, and then he'd come into the house and he'd give me all the pages. He'd print them out on that thing with the holes in the side, and I would edit and talk to him about it. And the thing that got me was, it was so funny. I mean, yeah, it was scary, but really,
funny.
my God, his sense of humor. I've been around a long time, I've still never met anybody smarter or funnier than him. Yeah.
But are you the inspiration for any of the lines? I mean, did you think of Mom, what's with the bars? Come on, did you?
I would never steal anything from Wes. He was a genius.
He was a genius.
He was a genius. But we did role playing at night sometimes. We would literally I would go and he would come at me and go, "What about this and what about that?" And, "Oh yeah, no." And then the first wardrobe that Robert came and they were trying out, and the Christmas sweater got put on him. Robert came out, and I'll never forget. It was, everybody just went, "Oh," that was it. I'm even getting goosebumps now. They thought, what better thing than to have somebody in a Christmas sweater?
The first ugly Christmas sweater party.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So actually riffing on that, if I could, if you guys had any stories of your first impressions of Wes Craven and when you first met him, kind of how that went down for the rest of you guys.
when I met Wes, we were going through script decisions on special effects because there just wasn't anybody involved in the film that was guiding it at the very beginning, and I walked in and I honestly had just that day come from a screening room, and I watched the first two, and I saw this guy, and I sat down in the room, and the first thing I thought was, well, when is the director, when is the writer going to come in? Because there was just this, right? I mean, because I thought to myself,
he was a college English professor, guys.
Either I thought he was a college English professor or he was the accountant. I mean, he wasn't he didn't put himself forward. You know, you had to come up and say, hi, I'm Mick, I'm going to be production designing, and then he goes, oh, hi, and he was very soft-spoken and the sweetest guy in the world. I mean, absolutely, Wes Craven was the last person that you ever thought would have come up with all the horrible ideas that he did.
Does anyone else want to weigh in?
The first time I met him was in that audition with Amanda. He hired me, and I'm like, love this guy. No one's hiring me, but this nice man gets me, you know, because I think he and I were from kind of the same part of the country. We're both really modest people. When I put those pajamas on, I think he and I were more embarrassed than anybody. And then when I saw what Amanda was wearing, I'm like, holy cow, that's so sexy. And, that opening scene, because we both had a very, prudish, conservative kind of upbringing. And so I understood, that he was a very modest person. I mean, personal modesty. And that made me feel really comfortable. You work with some people who are on the other spectrum, and they want you to take your clothes off. Come on, we're all friends. I'm like, no,
Amanda, did you want to weigh in on that? What were your first impressions when you first met Wes Craven?
Oh, well, he was... when I going in to read for him, he was really engaged. He really took the time, and I kind of, in hindsight, think he kind of cast us all on our first audition in a way. You would know more than that. Because I just realized, I really felt like when I was speaking with him, when I walked in the room, that he was already trying to figure out what you would know more than that. So I just felt really engaged, because often when you read for people, they're like, yeah. I just spent 7 hours working on this. But he felt really engaged, and
he knew what he wanted. He knew exactly what he wanted, and I remember how happy he was. He referred to Amanda as his Janet Leigh. I mean, he would come home the days that I wouldn't be on the set. I was on the set a lot. He would just be so thrilled with the work that the kids were doing. It was, he was so pleased. He worked so hard, but he was so happy. Do you remember $1.3 million this movie was made for? $1.3 million, and every cent is up on screen.
Yeah, every cent.
Every cent. Everybody.
It's not in our wardrobe. It was all from the secondhand store. I mean, it's a great inspiration. He wasn't finicky about certain things too. I asked him later, I'm like, oh, you picked the roses for the pajamas, and that motif of the roses on the front of the house. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like they were about $4 in Chinatown, and we could buy 7 pairs of them, and it was only $35. And I'm like,
ironic.
Because we all kind of wore the same size. Didn't all the jeans get mixed up? I think there was 3 pair of Levi's.
We all were the same
that
sizes.
we all had to share. And if we were all 4 in a scene, people were scrambling for another pair of jeans.
Including Johnny's, I think. He was probably about the same size.
Oh, man. Ironically, if you had the wardrobe to this film now, it would probably be worth a lot more than $1.3 million.
I had it all. From the first movie. Somehow it ended up in my garage. And New Line, I had the original Freddy glove and everything. Yeah, I know. I've kicked myself a million times. And I forget the head of the publicity at New Line. No, it was a woman. Anyway, she called me and just like, sweetest, can I take you to lunch and we'll go to...
Oh, Sarah Richard? No, not Sarah.
No, it wasn't Sarah, but it was the brunette. Anyway, I got taken to the most expensive lunch in Los Angeles, and I'm like, okay, what do they want? Because they're the cheapest people on the planet. They wanted the box of wardrobe. I gave it to him. I gave it to him. Kicked myself a million.
I do want to mention, if you guys could try and hold the mics a little closer. I know it's a little quiet out there. Obviously, we have to talk over a lot of room noise, so I apologize about that, guys.
Just tell them to shut up.
That would be great if you want to go there and do it, man. I'm certainly not going to stop you. I think Mick is a little more qualified than me. So you mentioned New Line, and New Line's rise to the top kind of always fascinated me. It was one of the most impressive in like modern Hollywood times. And obviously, it's no secret that it was built entirely off of the success of this franchise. It's called The House That Freddy Built. So I've always wondered, how hands-on was Bob Shea, New Line CEO, and what was it like to work for New Line in the 80s?
I mean, Bob was really hands-on, I'd say. It was right up Wes's, all the time. And because the budget, even the budget was small, Wes was very ambitious. But I remember that I found, when I was doing Never Sleep Again, found a copy of edits that Bob... Oh, my mic is out. Yeah. So we had, in Bob's possession someone's possession is a script that Bob had edited after the first draft, and there's some changes in there that actually I think made the movie really, really tight. Like some things were cut, and there were some just some very minor changes in the way Freddy is portrayed, and they were small, but he thought of himself as an auteur, of horror, definitely, and he thinks of himself as a poet and a Renaissance man. I mean, he thinks he's very, scintillating, and, he was always kind of a circus master and the Wizard of Oz kind of rolled into one. He was always right there.
I had a screaming argument with him one night because I didn't like the way he talked to Wes. So, because Wes was...
polite.
So polite, so nice. And
Bob was a New Yorker.
And Bob is a New Yorker, right? And he was yelling at him. And I was like, you won't get anywhere if you yell at him. Okay? I should know. I tried. It didn't work. Don't yell at him.
Bob Shea, when we were working on Nightmare on Elm Street 3, the sets kept expanding, and director was a little bit out of control, and we would get up to a point where my original budget was like $70,000 to do all the sets themselves, and I mean not the other stuff, but so we got up to 70,000, and Bob comes out and goes, well, you're going to have to let everybody go. I go, fine. So I fired everybody, and I told everybody that they would be back that night. And we had a day without any art department whatsoever, and everybody fell apart. And I mean, it just all went down the tubes. And so at the end of the day, he says, so how much more do you need to finish? And I go, well, you don't even really know what half these sets look like. The director, Chuck Russell's changing his mind all the time. And so anyway, we went up to $158,000, where every 2 days I would fire my crew and hire them back. And then I'd fire the crew and then hire them back. And I mean, literally so that they would have 4 paychecks every week, a paycheck as they were leaving, right? And then, 2 days later, another paycheck as they were leaving. It was the craziest thing. And at the very end of it, we had a wrap party in a bowling alley, right?
Oh God,
You remember the bowling alley?
I remember that.
and Bob walks in and he walks up to me and he goes, Mick, I gotta tell you, you were right. It looked great. I still am not sure that you're fiscally responsible. I said, dude, this film costs $158,000, and that's it for like all the sets and everything. And virtually everything on that film was a set, and all of them were weird, So I still think we did pretty good. But the way that I got on this film originally was I was working on the special effects for it over at Peter Chesney's shop. This was before this, because you always start the effects before you start the film, because you have to get those tested and you have to know what you're going to do before you start filming. And so I was in his shop, and I was running Peter Chesney's shop, and I was going in on the last day to put my billing in, and I'm waiting for the elevator on the Robertson building that they just moved into, right? And I'm like pressing the button, and a guy by the name of Jerry Olson steps up, and I had known Jerry Olson from a couple of other films that I did, and I said, hey, what are you doing? He says, well, I just got hired on this film. And I said, well, it wouldn't be Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And he goes, yeah. I said, this is the final billing for the effects until we start filming. And we both got into the elevator, and in 7 floors, it was on the 8th floor, but on 7 floors, I got the job of the production designer on it. I said, you need a production designer. I'm also art department, but I know the effects because I set most of them up with Peter. And he goes, well, that's a great recommendation. And so I got the job. Bravo. Yeah, for me.
Oh, if you want to.
Oh, thanks. Amanda, do you have any stories working for New Line in the 80s?
Any Bob Shea stories?
No, I don't think so. I was not on the set as that many days, really. I mean, I met him occasionally. He was always just really nice to me, but I didn't, he was never, if he had any to-dos about me, they never came directly at me, you know what I mean? But he was always very nice to me, but I actually had very little interaction with him. And then Heather, you've kept up through the years having interactions with him.
Yeah, I try to see him once in a while.
Yeah, and I think he's always thought very fondly of us on many levels. I know,
yeah,
he has a business.
But I always say, thanks for all the work, Bob.
Yeah, I know, and yet, he never hired me again, but he does make nice movies.
Yeah.
Cool. So Mick mentioned was a rap party at a bowling alley. I was curious on these films if you guys have any memories of your premieres or opening weekends or any fun stories from that.
Okay, so the cast and crew screening was at Raleigh Studios.
No, Warner Brothers.
So
yeah.
My boyfriend made us late, and the fire marshal wouldn't let me in because it was too crowded. And
they wouldn't let me and Johnny in either because it was too crowded. So we said, can't we just sit in the aisle? And they're like, sorry, ma'am. And we're like, okay.
So we didn't see it.
So we didn't see it. Yeah, we didn't see it. We went outside, and I remember Nick Cage was coming off of an audition or something. No, Nick had come with Johnny, and then you and your boyfriend, and me and my boyfriend. We all were like, damn.
Going, I hope they're enjoying our movie.
I kind of remember somebody came out and said, you can sit in my seat. And so I came in and sat down, maybe in the back row after the movie had started. They finally felt guilty, I guess.
Yeah.
But it was so Bush League. It was so low rent. I just can't emphasize that enough. Yeah. It was back of the bus all the time.
All the way.
And it still is.
It
no, I'm
still
just kidding.
is. And then I went to see it in Westwood. It opened in the theaters. And again, I just want to preface this, I am the most punctual person on the planet, but I date people that are always late. And so I tried to see it twice in the theaters, and both times it was sold out, which is nice, and I was late. And so I never actually saw the movie until it came out on VHS. And then I finally saw it on the big screen in Chicago at a reunion.
Wow. Yeah, I saw it in Oakland, I think. When I really saw it, I saw it in Oakland, and the crowd in Oakland, if anyone's been to Oakland, anyway, it's a great city. Everyone was so loud.
Right.
Yelling at the screen, yelling at Marge to take another sip of the vodka. You drink it up, baby. You drink that vodka.
I have to tell you, I saw, I was there at the cast and crew, and then a friend of mine says, if you really want to see this film, you have to go to South Central. and he takes me down to South Central like 3 days later, and we sit in where I was the thing that was glowing in the audience. That just me. I mean, just glowing white. And I look up, and we look at the screen, and every time somebody says something on the screen, the audience yells the next line at them, right? And the greatest thing was when the steel door shows up and everybody yells at the screen, "Look, a door!"
I get humiliated because of that line. Every convention, I have to write, "Look, a door."
A door. How many times do you have to
You know why that line was written? So because of the visual effects in 3, and it was the last day we did reshoots, the day we were talking about, and we were supposed to do this in 3 days, but no, we got 1 day because they're so cheap.
Right.
So they had a little square like this big where they put up some fake like hallway, like.
By the way, as to who she's talking about is me.
It's him.
Yeah.
So they put up some fake walls, and they put me, Patricia, and I don't know, is it Kincaid or I can't remember, in this tiny space. And then they're like, okay, we only have 5 minutes to do this, so just imagine that there's going to be this door here. It's going to be a visual effect. It's going to be this like metal thing. And it's going to be steaming. It's going to be like really hot. And we're like, okay. And then the director didn't have faith in you guys because he didn't know what the thing was going to look like. He thought it might look like, I don't know, a shed or something. So he said, Heather, just say, it's a door.
I wondered about that.
Because it's all the art director's fault.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
That's my memory, which is always bad.
We did our best.
No, that day was really a day in hell.
Oh, that was a day.
And we shot in hell.
Yeah, we shot 20 hours on that day. 20 to 24 hours, and they basically we had 3 days worth of work to do, and we kept saying, okay, we need to do this on at least 2 days, but you guys just tell us when to stop. And they did after 22 hours. Right. But we really got the tortured Joey that day.
And Mean, do you have any stories from opening weekend? You probably had a little bit of a different perspective.
Okay, so opening weekend, well actually it was opening week. We went in the middle of the week. We were in New York because that's where Bob was, and we were sort of out there for some reason, and we drove to Harlem. We drove to Harlem and stood in the back of a theater, and I mean, I was so excited because A, it was packed to the rafters, and B, it was exactly, no, don't go, get out of there, girl, get out of there. People standing up and screaming and telling you what to do and what not to do. I was the only one. And I said, multiply that by a gajillion, and honey, you're on your way.
I think we owe our success to those theaters.
Yes,
that,
absolutely.
Where they let people do that, because the theaters I go to, they're always going, shh, sit down. Shh, sit down.
Not in Wes's movies.
Yeah.
No.
Be quiet.
We were so excited, though. So excited.
Now, I'm going to go.
So, Nightmare on Elm Street obviously became not just a classic horror franchise, but one of the seminal franchises of the 1980s. Was there ever a point where you realized that, like, wow, these are the movies that, like, defined this decade, and any, experiences from that?
Well, you guys tell us all the time, so I do believe it. I don't know, I never look at it, I don't have the capacity to look at it like that because it's part of my life, and I don't look at the grand picture, but you guys tell me that it's that, so I believe you. The proof is in the pudding. You're here in an awesome place, and
I was talking to Rachel Talalay. My sister was co-art directing 3 and 4 with me, and she passed away 4 years ago in an airplane accident. And at her funeral, Rachel Talalay, and I was still working in LA, Rachel Talalay came up and said, you ought to think about the legacy of the films that you've done. And I thought, well, what? It's a silly thing to think of in LA, especially if you're working crew and not a star. But if you're working on the crews, you don't think about legacy. You just think, oh, well, where's the next film? And so I packed all our stuff up and I moved to Washington first, and to be with my grandchildren, and I got on Facebook. And the very first time I got on Facebook, I showed it to my wife. I said, look, this guy knows me. He knows what I've done. And then I started to look around and I go, oh my God, look at all these people that know what we've done. And people go, yeah, you worked on a couple of the most famous films out of the 80s. I'm like, really? And here you are.
hey, Amanda.
You guys, yeah. Any stories, any notion of that? Like when you realize, later on, like, wow, these are decade-defining films?
Yes. Well, okay, just like in the God's honest truth, as a young actor, my agents were so against me doing Nightmare on Elm Street. They were like, it's going to be the end of your career. You cannot do a horror film. And there was something about Wes that I really liked, and I defied them. And at the time, I was with like the biggest agency in LA, and they didn't work too hard for me after that. But about 3 years after the movie, I was at my mom's house. I grew up in a little beach town, and I was handing out candy at Halloween, and about 5 Freddys came to the front door, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I'm in that movie. And they're like, yeah, right. I'm like, no, really? And they're like 10-year-olds. I'm like, no, listen, you little shit. I'm in the movie. I played Tina. Nobody would believe me. But I went, oh my gosh, like, this is something. Like,
I realized it at Halloween 2 that year when everyone had a Freddy costume. I was like, oh my God, what are they thinking?
Hey, when did you first see a Nancy costume, though?
At conventions. Yeah, my fans.
That was when I first realized that it was when you started seeing you girls.
See, there's a factor here that you guys don't understand is when we were working in horror films, we were barely above porn and right above, and we were barely above porn and just underneath lawyers as to respect.
Yeah.
I mean, we were, and the thing is
sad. But
I mean, literally, if you did one show in a horror film, the rest of your shows were basically going to be horror films, right?
Yeah. My agents wouldn't let me put a Nightmare on Elm Street on my resume.
Yeah, right.
I finally was able to put it on my resume in 1990. It's just that's kind of when horror started going more mainstream.
But it's also when those 17-year-olds who saw Nightmare were old enough to be executives in Hollywood. It was like,
they were the people calling me in.
No, it's true. Yeah.
The way it is now, it's kind of like on equal or better terms with other films. But boy, back then, man, we were the slums.
Yeah, people were like, they're like, oh, you did a horror film? I'm like, damn straight. And people dress up like me. They don't dress up like you. So there.
There's not any Meryl Streeps out there today.
So I do want to give a chance for the audience to weigh in here, guys. We have a microphone set up here if anyone wants to come up and ask their question into the mic, or if you're brave and you want to stand up and be really loud, you can ask a question from where you're sitting. I know people get a little shy about talking into a mic.
Is your eyebrow really that shape?
That is an excellent question. Yes, it is. I don't have the skills to.
Cute eyebrows.
I don't have the skills.
I mean, at our makeup effects studio, we punch a lot of eyebrows, and if we did that one, people would be like, "No one ever has that kind of an eyebrow."
I have to give credit to Mick for doing the production design on my eyebrows.
Great. They're awesome.
It's just what everyone here was hoping we would be talking about.
I've already looked at all of your eyebrows, so.
We have a question in the back, my man. Try and be loud, please.
So, I love, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I love New Nightmare. I'm one of those people.
Yay.
And, I love the whole series, but particularly Heather and anyone else that was involved, when you were first informed by Wes or whoever it is that there was a script for you to return to,
That's a good
what was
question.
going through your head? What did you feel like?
Well, it's strange that I had lunch with Wes, and I don't think I knew for sure that he was writing New Nightmare. I didn't know what his political situation with New Line was, or that he was striving to find an idea. But I remember at the lunch very vividly talking about, like, everyone's normal, everyone's like a normal person living their life, and then there's the second, that knife edge, when you become mentally unstable or even mentally ill, you know? And we talked about that idea for a long time, and I don't know why we did, but it was this idea that you can live a normal life, but then something just makes you snap, and you're not in control of it. And we talked about that, then we talked about, I had a very scary this part of my life with a stalker, and how I really realized at that moment I just didn't really want to be an actress for a while. It was extremely traumatic for me and my husband. We moved to England for a while just to like avoid all the things the FBI was telling me I had to do. So I told him how bad it had been, and like it had prevented me from being that gung-ho about pursuing my acting career. So I'd had kids and I did that whole thing. And then about maybe a month or two later, he calls me. He's like, "Heather, I've decided to, I'm going to be directing the next Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'm asking you if you'll read the script because I'm bringing Nancy back, and I also just, want to let you know you're playing yourself." And I'm like, "What?" And so he sent the script over, and I read it, and my husband read it, and we were just like, "No way." There's no way. After all that had really happened in my life, I'm like, how could Wes do this? I don't know, what do you call it? When they abuse your trust, let's just say that. I had a moment where I really felt that. And, but I hadn't worked in maybe, 3 or 4 years, really, with a really great role like Nancy. So I convinced my husband that it would be okay, that Wes was such a good director and he was so careful and everything would be fine. And I asked Wes to change a couple of things, like to make it less like me. And I asked him to change one line in particular, which is, "My mother died in an insane asylum." And it was in the script, and he never would change it. Like every time a new script revision would come in, I would say, "Wes, don't forget about that line about in Act 3 when I say my mother died in an insane asylum. I don't want to say that." Oh, it was not an insane asylum, it was a mental institution. And he never would change it. So the day of the shooting, I said, "Wes, you want me to say something else? Do you have some lines for me to say?" And he's like, "I'm not changing that line, Heather." And I thought, like, if I could have quit that day, I would have quit. I just felt, God damn it, you're asking me to play Heather Langenkamp, and I'm just asking you to change one line because my mom really lives, and if she sees this movie and Heather Langenkamp's mom died in a mental hospital, she would feel just very betrayed. And so he wouldn't change it. And it was just because he was stubborn, because I had asked him, and I wasn't like I shouldn't have be in that position anyway, I thought. So we get on the set, and I'm in my costume, and I'm with John Saxon, and I just say, a very close relative died in a mental institution. And that's the line that's in the movie now. And he didn't make me read the real line, but he wasn't going to change it. So there was the one time I butted heads with Wes Craven.
And that's my favorite of the series, so thank you for being brave and saying yes.
Thank you.
Brave soul.
I want to briefly share my first experience in Elm Street. Wait.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, speak. Yeah, a little loud into it. Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, there you go.
I want to briefly share my first experience in Elm Street, and then I'll ask a quick question. I was like 7 or 8 years old, and I'm telling my dad I want to see this movie. He's telling me no, we get scared, and after like 15 minutes, 20 minutes of being stubborn and arguing with him, he's all right, I'll let you see it. Just leave me alone, stop it. So then I watch it, and then I go to sleep that night, and I hear pipes banging. I'm like, pipes! And back then I didn't know because there was air in the pipes. And that's, oh shit, he's coming to get me. I jumped out of that bed so quick, ran to the next room, and got under the bed with him. It was like, back then I was scared shitless, you know? But then I think about it to this day, and it was like so hilarious, that first experience. And then from that, you know, I grew to love the movies, and I'm a fanatic, you know, to this day. And moving on. Heather, I read online that you would play Nancy one more time, given the right opportunity.
I mean, it's the most frequent question I'm getting these days because Jamie Lee Curtis had such a incredible performance in Halloween. I think that I have absolutely no idea if they're going to make another Nightmare on Elm Street, and I've never been approached. But I think the fans are naturally curious, and so we'll see what happens. I don't have any answers for you, but of course, I couldn't say no to playing Nancy again.
Thank you.
Actually, bounce. Oh, we got one up here.
You guys are all my heroes, and I'd love to know what your favorite on-set memory is.
Okay, there are so many kind of fun things. I have to say, I have a favorite filming thing, but Heather and I would sit on your steps of your dressing room and do the crossword puzzle all day between scenes, and we would just sit there and do the crossword puzzle. And that's like one of my most vivid memories of doing Nightmare on Elm Street is crossword puzzling with Heather. But I think like my favorite was the collaboration doing my death scene in the rotating room. It just was so intense and kind of arty and challenging, and it was the most closely I got to work with Wes, where he was just like, "Okay, we're doing this," and yeah, like I felt like he was painting me. You know what I mean? Like painting me into his vision. So that's that'd be my favorite acting thing, and then hanging out with Heather on the steps of her dressing room doing the crossword puzzle.
Okay, that room, that rotating room, also was the room where they did, the sucking into the bed. And that day was, unfortunately or fortunately, I've never been able to figure it out. I wasn't on the set, but I get a call at home, and they say, and it's Wes, I'm okay. Let me just tell you, I'm okay. I didn't die. So if they were doing, they had filled that room was filled with liquid, and it was done by
the blood
grips were with ropes and things, and Wes and the DP were strapped in, and they weren't counting on centrifugal force or whatever it's called. When they flipped the room around and all that liquid, they lost the ropes, and the room just kept doing that. Yes. No, Wes almost bit it big time. Yeah. So
memorable.
Very memorable. Very memorable. He was shaken, but I will never forget the phone call. I'm okay. I'm okay. And I'm like, yeah, you better be. So that was the same room.
I mean, every day I worked, there was a memory I have. I probably could regale you with a memory from there was only 25 days. That's all it took to shoot Nightmare on Elm Street. So, but I think like Mandy, when you're in an intense scene that involves a lot of effects like that, and the bathtub was incredibly memorable because it took a long time to shoot that scene. It was almost a whole day, and there were so many aspects of it. Just the bathtub was actually about 9 feet deep, and there was a man named Jim Doyle in the bottom of the bathtub in a scuba diving rig, and Wes would, and I'm sitting there on a 2x4, like that, and Jim is between my legs, so I mean already I'm embarrassed, and then Wes would bang on the side of the tub whenever he wanted the hand to come out. Wes would bang, and then we did that like 100 times, and then they moved the camera. So slowly, I was the one who had to manage the bubbles because the art director was nowhere to be found. No. And I'd be like, more bubbles, please, more bubbles. And so then I'm like, I need some
Modesty bubbles.
I need some modesty bubbles, and I need some warm water because the whole tank would cool down like every 20 minutes. So it was so laborious. But the most memorable thing about that day was Bob Shea. I've been basically naked, but I had like a little, bra and panties on, but there's one section where I did have to take all my clothes off, and when I had to jump out of the bathtub and get my robe on, and so everyone was so embarrassed. I mean, Wes was just totally mortified. The set was closed. Everyone was like really, really embarrassed, and so Bob, before the take, goes, Heather, I don't want you to freak out. And I don't know anything about this. I don't know how it happened. And I'm like, what, Bob? He's like, we just found a German photographer up in the catwalk of the studio, and he's been taking pictures all morning. We've kicked him out. We kicked him out. But I just wanted to let you know, in case you ever saw any pictures of you, know that it wasn't me. Just know that it wasn't me. And I'm like, thanks, Bob. Cut to a year and a half later, and I meet David Leroy Anderson, and he's like, I'd like you to go meet my grandmother, my 90-year-old grandmother from the Philippines. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait. We're gonna make a traditional Filipino meal. I'm like, oh, I can't wait. And I walk into the house, and on the coffee table is a brand new copy of Celebrity Skin, and there I am.
Yeah.
And the grandmother had put it on the table so that she knew, I knew, we all knew that I was just a shameless whore.
How have I never heard that story?
Never heard that story.
But we ended up being very close friends. There's no secrets in our family.
I was in a meeting trying to hammer something out. We had gotten caught in dream loop, and we didn't really have a script when we started Nightmare 4, and we were in this loop, and everybody remembers the loop, right? Who doesn't? Okay, so we're in it. So we come out, get into the truck, and the truck starts out, and then they run around the corner again, and we're trying to figure out what happens after that. I mean, we had to get Dan into a hospital, and we had to get Kristen somewhere else, and so we're sitting, and at this point, we're 2 hours into this meeting, and Bob Shea and everybody big is there, and we're around a table, and then there's another ring of people that are like all of our assistants and stuff are sitting around that, and literally we are talking about being in an airplane, and we're talking about we're in the middle of an argument as to who is Freddy. Is Freddy the pilot, the co-pilot, or what? And I'm like, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, we've gotten so lost in this. And I said, I just wish we hit nothing. And I said it out loud. You know, and I was like, it was like at that point, you know, where you really just don't give a shit anymore. And I said, man, I just wish we would hit nothing. And I hear this little PA over here go, really? What would that look like? I went, oh my God. That would look like, it would be like having an accident and piling into your own bumper, right? And Peter Chesney's sitting across from me and he goes, I can do that. And so we did the shot, which had never been done quite like that before. I mean, there had never been like a car that hits, the concept of a car hitting nothing. And so what we did is we took a cable we parked a big Caterpillar down here, and we put a cable run out to it, and put a camera at the end of the cable run, and literally tied the bumper of the truck to it, to the cable, and pulled the truck we got it up to 60 miles an hour and pulled the truck to the end of the cable and had the camera there, and that whole front end enveloping is actually done in real life. But I'm there at that, and this is my favorite moment. And nobody has really any idea what it's going to look like, right? You know, it's kind of it was a new thing. And the cable comes and the truck envelopes like this, and I'm out there going, yeah, yes, that was fucking awesome! And everybody's like looking at me like I'm like dancing around like, yeah, yes, that was fucking great, that was great. So, my favorite moment.
So we are unfortunately running really close to the edge of time. We do have time for one more, guys, so you two fight it out, yeah.
Oh, no fight.
All right, yeah, no, I'm joking. Yeah,
Wait, say that again?
You've done the interview with the Advocate.
Yes, I love that.
And you had mentioned equal pay.
Yes.
For women especially.
Yes.
And to me, no offense to Robert and everybody else, but you guys are the ones. You, Jamie, the women are the ones that make the horror movies, especially. So
ultimate final girl right there.
Is there anything that we, as horror fans, can do and support, can advocate for more women like you to get that kind of equality and
I think you just have to mention it, and Hollywood's really tight-lipped about what people make. That's the problem, is that I can only hear the rumor of I worked with Michael Dudikoff one time in a film, and someone was like, "Can you believe we're paying this guy $400,000 for this?" Or they just throw it out, and I was probably making scale, and that's just the way it's been for so long. And in your own life, if you can make parity, at our makeup effects shop, we not only make sure we have 50% or more women than men, we make sure there's parity, even, to the point where my husband's like, I miss kind of having some guys around, Heather. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't like our all-female working crew? They're better than they are. No, but he's like, you don't want to go overboard either, right? But then you have to make sure, a woman will often ask for less because she feels like, well, I'm new at this, and women have different expectations, and it's not their fault. They've been raised to think that way. And I'll tell her, well, a man in your job after 4 years of experience is now making this much an hour. And she'll be like, really? And I'm like, yeah. So I'm going to pay you that. Because you have to sacrifice to make everybody equal. You can't just think it's going to happen, all you guys can yell and scream, but I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately. Unless, everybody just says, because men can walk away from a job easily. They have men parts outweigh women parts 7-to-1. So, say for instance, somebody like a big star, they're not going to pay their rate. They move on to the next movie that's lined up to pay their rate. But a woman, a part like Nancy, that just doesn't come along. You would work for free or very little to play such a great role.
You said no, that somebody else would
There's someone, and they said that to me on Nightmare 7. They said,
There's no one else.
I know, but Wes even
do this
said
all
it.
the time. They say, "Oh no, if you, we have some." They don't.
But I'll tell
They
you,
don't. There is no one.
the phone
There
call
is
I
no
got
one.
from Wes, because I said I want parody with Robert Englund for Nightmare 7, and they're like, oh yeah, but Robert's done 7 of the movies, and he's like, I said, yeah, but I'm going to be working 7 times more days than him, and then Wes called and said, Heather, they passed, and I said, I get it. Okay, I'll work for what you're going to give. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's something. I lived in Oklahoma growing up, and my mom campaigned for the Equal Rights Amendment, and we had actresses, Mary Kay Place, all sorts of actresses who were very political, come to our house and would raise money. People call my mom like the worst names for, terrible names, because she really believed in this, and it really made me really understand the issue. And
And the Ginger Rogers, that famous quote, everything but backwards and in high heels.
Well, thank you. Well, I don't want to end on such a dark, sad note. So my man in the front row, it ended good, but you have another one? Yeah.
Thank you so much. My childhood is like you guys. It's almost surreal. I just want you to know, you actually had real nightmares throughout your lives.
Yes.
It's like on a daily person.
The tongue in Nightmare 7 continues to wrap around my head, covered with KY jelly.
The kaleidoscope in Nightmare on Elm Street 4 was a dream that I had 4 weeks before that. Because I dreamed that I saw Freddy looking at me through a kaleidoscope, and I tried to duplicate it and didn't get anywhere close. But that was exactly where that set came from.
Randy, any nightmares?
No, I wish I did. I want to lie because it's so boring, but no.
Nightmares? Did Wes have a nightmare one time? Is Wes having nightmares again? That's a line from Nightmare 7.
Yeah. No, he. Although I have to tell you, he would write all day, we would edit all night, he would sleep, then he'd wake up and put the pith helmet on, grab his coffee, go back out to the office and start writing these horrific things. So yes, I think he was doing that in his sleep, because he wrote Nightmare just every day for a very short period of time. Smart, funny, scary. Smart, funny, scary. And he never went anywhere. We never went anywhere while he was writing it. I would be in the house going, okay, when's he coming in? La la la, and he'd come in with these pages. Smart, funny, scary.
So we are unfortunately out of time, guys, but be sure to come by their tables, get some autographs, get some photos. I know they have a lot more stories to tell you, and let's give them one more round of applause.
This is John Glover, and you are watching Fandom Spotlight. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Lionel Luther recommends it. Have some fun. Follow your fandom.